competing conceptions of the nature of happiness. What one person means by happiness can be completely different to what the next person means. If someone said that they wanted to talk about momentary sensations, enduring moods, desires, beliefs, global life attitudes, achievements, activities, states of the world and what makes for a flourishing human life, you might expect them to be talking for quite some time, and you might also expect them to use different words to talk about each of these different subjects. Yet one word is often used to talk about all these things, and that word in English is happiness. Happiness can be used to refer to any one of 6 really quite different things. I'm going to call these 6 very different things the 6 conceptions of happiness. And let me tell you what they are again, so you know what they are, and so you can see how very different they are. So, conception 1, happiness is a momentary sensation, such as pleasure or enjoyment. 2, an enduring mood, like tranquility or contentment. 3, believing that you're achieving your desires, that you're getting what you want. 4, actually achieving your desires and not simply perhaps falsely believing that you are. Or 5, believing that your life as a whole is going well by your own standards or priorities. Or 6, leading a life that's considered by some objective standpoint to be worthwhile or worth living, or a flourishing human life. The 6 things just listed are extraordinarily different. So different that you might reasonably wonder whether the fact that they're all referred to as happiness isn't just a linguistic accident. Like the etymological quirk that resulted in a bit of land at the edge of a river and a financial institution both being called a bank. Being called a bank is about the only thing that a financial institution and a bit of land at the edge of a river have in common. So it may be that the only thing that a fleeting feeling, such as pleasure, and a flourishing human life have in common is that people are inclined to talk about both using the same word, happiness. When an ambiguous word can have a range of undesirable consequences, you might take very seriously the thought that the word should be abolished. Okay? And I think we should take very seriously the idea that the word happiness should be abolished from our lexicon. We should abolish the ambiguous word if using it causes great confusion, and if the great confusion that it causes has really undesirable consequences, in favour of sort of more specific words, right, that make clear what it is that we're talking about. And in the case of happiness, we have a whole bunch of more specific words right to hand. Let me just go through the 6 conceptions of happiness again by name. Pleasure or enjoyment, tranquility, desire fulfillment, perceived desire fulfillment, life satisfaction, flourishing. Actually, flourishing is probably still open to a number of interpretations, but we can sort that out. So here's my call today. Let's stop talking about happiness and instead say more precisely which of the 6 very different things that we might mean by using the word we have in mind. Well, I'm actually not so optimistic as to think that people will actually stop using the word just because a philosopher tells them they should. But if we do keep using the word, it's incredibly important that we at least bear in mind just how differently the word happiness can be used by different people or even by the same person at different times. Since otherwise we can be talking past each other, literally talking about different subjects without realising it. And I think this happens actually, unfortunately, often in discussions of happiness, and perhaps especially in discussions about the value of happiness. For instance, without wishing to pick on anyone in particular, some people write books or essays with titles such as Against Happiness. The title's shocking because many people are inclined to think that happiness is something worth pursuing. In fact, some people take this to be true by definition, that happiness is something worth pursuing, because they use the word happiness just to mean a flourishing or worthwhile human life. That's the sixth conception, or the sixth use of happiness I mentioned before. Well, if you open the pages of a book with a title like Against Happiness, what you invariably find, or almost invariably find, is that by happiness the person means something like momentary pleasure. And when they claim that happiness is not worth seeking, what they mean is that momentary pleasure is not the only thing worth seeking. It often happens that other people just can't resist debate and they have to rise to argue about this and insist in reply that happiness is in fact greatly valuable, giving various reasons for thinking that happiness is very valuable, which reveal that what they mean by happiness is not momentary feelings of pleasure at all, but rather something else, like leading a deeply fulfilling life full of rich and varied and indisputably worthwhile activities. So, one person insists that happiness is valuable, the other person insists that it's not. It looks, on the surface, like there's a substantive disagreement, but there's not. Each side agrees that momentary pleasure is not the only or even necessarily the most important value in life, and each side also agrees that a deeply fulfilling life of rich and varied and indisputably worthwhile activities is, well, by definition, worthwhile. There's no substantive disagreement, right? It's just a difference in how people are using the words. And I think a lot of apparent debates about happiness are like this, sort of non-debates with people talking past each other. And if I may speak bluntly, I think these debates are sort of pointless and they're a waste of everyone's time because there's no genuine issue at stake.